Yeah, no offense, Lauren. If you call me a pussy, it doesn't land the same way if you do. If Gabby Reece calls me a pussy, I'm going deep into a corner of the darkest part of my house and saying what's going on with me?
Yeah, Gabby's more serious. I like it. I need to channel it.
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want you to say that. But you, I'm like, okay, Lauren, what are you basing that off of? You know?
Yeah, and if I said that to Laird, he'd be like, look deep in my eyes and be like, there's something in her that means that, and that would just not fly. I have never said anything like that to him in almost 27 years.
You know what's another good comeback though? Bitch.
Oh, no.
You're acting like a little bitch.
But see, but here's the thing. You
guys can.
No, well, she can't. Well, she can because I don't take it as seriously. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, look at her. She's playful. Look at me. I'm not so playful.
No, if you say it, I'm like, oh, she actually thinks I'm a bitch. Like, I know she doesn't actually think
look at
that.
her.
But I am studying Gabby's theories because I just told you off air, I have listened to every single podcast that you have been on. And whenever you do a solo episode on your podcast, I stalk it. I want so many solos. Okay. I love the solos.
They're hard though, because you're trying to create value and connect and move through categories. Like you're trying to slide through. So those for me are always tricky because I'm like, who's going to listen to this?
Me, everyone.
Well,
I'll tell you a secret on the if we get dorky, podcast analytics side, because I'm sitting in the podcast side.
Sure, the business.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Those ones, all the hosts always think those ones are challenging to do, but they always do the best. Because I always remind people, people are there for the host.
You hope.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes they're there, they want to see a big guest, obviously, but they also are coming back to see what that host perspective is. So whenever you share a little bit more about how you think, everyone's like, oh, I got to get into that.
Yeah, it's a fine line. Don't you guys find it where you're trying to listen to your guest, but then trying to bring some point of view in there when it's warranted? So that's always the dance.
I think it helps to, and you probably have experienced this too, to have another guest that's used to being on the mic.
Oh, yes. I love the yes and no answers. Those are my favorite.
Yeah, it's like, please.
That's when I just talk over. I'll just go for it. When I see that, I'm like, okay, cool. We're just going to talk. But you guys have a lot of different types of people. I usually have people that are, my big dilemma is how do I make this, the information attainable? Like I get some scientists or doctors and I'm like, okay, 6th grade level, what does that mean in our householder language?
That's really, really great. You make it digestible.
Yeah, because I think that people who have access to high performance information, they're okay. My hope is how do we support the people that are too busy to sift through and it's already confusing, and what does that mean? And so really just trying to highlight high-end content, but in sort of like an approachable way, not like, okay, so 10 minutes before you eat that, take this pill, and then 14 minutes after that, you got to drink this. Like people are just going to be like, I can't do that. So, chunk it out and make it digestible, and also explain to them why it would be beneficial.
I totally agree with you. You came on our podcast before years ago when I was pregnant again.
I know, it's amazing. I feel like you were just a little more pregnant the last time I saw you. But
no, I had gained 60 pounds and this one I've only gained 23. So that's the difference. It's the same amount of pregnancy.
This baby could pop out here, right? Like it could,
are we there? I'm excited.
We're there. Like I'm giving birth right now, probably. I need to multitask.
Perfect. You're busy.
I'm busy.
I really do appreciate that about the two of you. Live together, love together, work together.
You know what? We don't work together as much as people think, and I bet you it's similar to you and Laird. Like you guys have your own lanes, but then you come together and you do work sometimes. That's what it seems.
Yes, but you are interviewing people. Like Laird and I, sometimes we get asked to be interviewed at the same time, and I'm like, oh, here we go. Because no, you go, I go, who goes? Did you just talk over me? It's like all that, like right here live. So I give you a lot of props for that.
You said something in the last episode that I didn't take seriously enough, and I'm going to after this pregnancy. You said that you talked about the importance of sauna and ice bath. And I think now it's becoming a little bit more mainstream. And I think that I really want to use those two things as a tool in my postpartum. You still do that every week?
I did the sauna today. I did not do the ice. I'll admit it.
Okay.
I usually probably get in the ice maybe once a week for a few rounds. I'll incorporate it with pool training because sometimes it's like, okay, fill the ice tub up. You guys can get a cold plunge. I would suggest that because it's just maybe the two of you, but you're pretty social. It's a way that it's really accessible. You're not like schlepping ice and filling it up and draining it, and it's cold and ready to roll. I would there's really something to it. I mean, obviously Wim Hof kind of really popularized this, and then a lot of us have taken the practice on. It's very old, but hormone regulation, just all, I mean, the trick is you'll hear people use brown fat as a part of it, like especially for us girls, right? Cellulite and brown fat.
Yeah, Huberman was just on here.
Okay, so you were translating then. If Huberman was here, were you doing a lot of translating?
Yeah, we spent we broke it into a 2-part episode.
Yeah, he's great.
He's amazing.
But apparently, you have to do. I think it's 11 minutes a week. Is that right?
Yeah, he said 11 minutes a week. You can get it in, ideally, like maybe 2 to 3 days of the week. Right,
to make brown fat. So I just want to say to people, now we're adding a caveat. It's not good enough to just do cold once in a while. Okay, it's brown fat. Now you got to get those 11 minutes in. So I think it's really achievable. And now more and more, I actually think you're going to see centers, you know.
I think you're seeing way more. Yeah, it's starting to happen in Austin.
Yeah. Okay, how's the move been?
Move's been great.
Yeah, you guys seem like you've built a really fun and beautiful life there.
The move is great. I feel like it's similar to what you guys did. LA wasn't aligning for us.
No, it's amazing for coming, working, doing stuff like this, getting shit done, but like to be able to disconnect and get out of it a little bit and get a little bit, away from the chaos.
Yeah, and maybe just people whose minds are thinking about other things, just a different focal point. I always say people came to LA or California to strike gold, and then think about it, then it was to become a famous actor. So people trip out about the mentality, but I'm like, if you think about it, it lines up perfectly with that mentality of like, oh, cool, what's over there? Shiny things. But the flip side is if you're in self-care, this is the best place you can be, because I still find a lot of the smartest people are here. Having said that, there's also a lot of people in Austin.
Well,
and Hawaii.
Yeah, it's just different.
Like how?
I think Hawaii, there's things that are sort of more organically built into the practices. They're not like making it so precious. Like, I was mindful today. They're like, I took a walk on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
It's not like it's not such an asshole vibe. It's like
it's just different. Yeah,
it's not like I was out there and I connected and I grounded myself. Like
or I had a bowl that had 16 different fruits in it. It's like I went and picked a piece dragon fruit.
Yeah, my friend came over and brought me fruit from their tree.
What I did so we haven't seen you since before the pandemic, since before all that shit hit the fan. And there's certain people that when that happened, I looked to because I was like, okay, everyone's all over the place. Nobody knows what's going on. Everyone's in a panic. And so there's a handful of people, you and Laird included, that I looked at like, how are they living their life during all this chaos? I imagine in Laird's case, it was like a boy in a candy shop in some ways, right? Because he's like, oh, I'm just going to be outside and running around and away from everybody, right? Not to, but I look because there was 2 trains of thought. There's a train of thought like, oh my God, life's over, world's ending, we're all fucked. And then there's the other people, and it's a rarer breed that was like, okay, I'm going to use this. I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to get better. I'm going to get faster. I'm going to get more grounded. I'm going to get more connected. And I feel like you guys were those people.
Yes. And that's our luxury too, right? Like, so I think because of the weirdness of our occupation, that created that freedom to do that. But I think it's like Laird says, listen, when stuff starts getting weird like that, you got to slow everything down. And even like when you go to the market and people are acting really strange and afraid of you, that can make us feel combative, I think, because we're like, don't be afraid of me. And because it's this whole fear is a really powerful emotion. And Laird is the one who's like, listen, everybody reacts differently when they're afraid and this unknown. So he said when he go to places where there were other people, he was going to be more compassionate for them instead of like, okay, I'm going to put you in a headlock right now, that kind of thing. So I think it was that opportunity, but I do want to isolate the fact that it was also a luxury. I think who got their ass kicked were people who are real working people, and it was like they don't have that luxury.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I don't even mean it from that standpoint. I just mean like, there's some people that they're like, okay, like we got to really hunker down. We can't do anything. We can't get out there. I feel like you guys are so active and so like,
you made it work. But I get what she's saying. She's saying that they have the luxury of having an ice bath, and
even the space.
And the space. And like some people didn't. I think what Michael's saying is you guys really seem like you thrive.
Well, here's what I'm saying.
A victim mentality.
Well, here's what I'm saying is there was a period of the pandemic where you started to let yourself, or I personally started to let myself go. And then I was like, I look at people like yourself and I'm like, okay, like this is also an opportunity to get really strong again.
Yeah, you
really
used it as opportunity.
Right? And I was like, okay, I'm going to go that way.
Yeah.
But there was, I think there was a moment in time where I could have gone the other way.
Why do you, I mean, because you're very conscientious and you can be productive. What in you was like, I'm just going to chill?
It wasn't that I was just gonna, like, I never thought I was just gonna chill, but I was like, oh, this is a moment in time where like I could chill, right? And I'm like, okay, now I don't have to push it as hard. Everyone's kind of taking it easy, right?
Oh,
Like it gives you like a reason to kind of, like you said, slow down in a way. But then I was like, wait a minute, that's the wrong way to go.
Well, and also if everyone's talking about their health, that would be the time to juice it up and say, all right, I'm going to fortify and I'm going to be extra diligent. And because it's those things in your control, not in your control. So much was out of everybody's control, but those practices were in your control. And so I think, Laird it's a whole other case because he's also secretly always doing it because in his mind, he's at any moment, if the surf is going to show up, he wants to be on it and he wants to perform well. And he's, motivated on a deep level. And for me, I'm just trying to keep up. And I don't need to learn that lesson. I've said this a lot of times. I don't need to lose my health to understand that how important it is. I've really, from injuries and other things, it's like I will take care of my health at any cost. That doesn't mean I won't eat a piece of chocolate cake. It just means like it's a priority.
What is it like being married to someone that's mood is dependent on the surf? Like I want to actually, because Michael's mood sometimes can business can dictate his mood. So please give me some tools to how to handle it.
It's there's a gentleman named Paul Check. I don't know if you know who that is. He's really great and far out and whatever. And he has a wife that runs his business, and her name's Penny. And they have a more untraditional dynamic. And so I say to Penny, okay, you organized Paul's life and all of this. Why do you still do that after all this time? And she's like, I believe in the mission. I believe in his cause. So at the end of the day, you believe in what Michael's doing, what he's put together, what he's trying to put out into the world and such. And so in the end, I appreciate that Laird is so dedicated to this quest that I just sometimes I just watch the show, and I used to have dreams that I could make 20-foot waves so that I could be like, don't worry, tomorrow they're going to be here, but I can't. And for people who are in natural sports, rock climbers or whatever, they do a lot of waiting, and it's a very frustrating part. And big waves come actually so infrequently, for real. And so with Laird, I'm like, okay, this is his path and his mission. I did learn this a long time ago. You feel however you want to feel. Make a safe space for me within that. So it's not you against the world in that moment, that I'm always allowed inside the envelope. I'm not going to ask you to feel different, but just don't make it now you're against the whole world.
That's good advice.
Yeah, it just makes it easier because then he doesn't feel like he has to be different, but I don't feel like I have to walk around on eggshells and resent that. And I always feel, I have a close friend and I just recently said to him, listen, with your partner, regardless of what's going on, you just want to be able to feel like you could put your hand on their wrist and you could always reach them. That no matter what was going on, even if you were in a dispute with one another, that you could put your hand on them and they could look at you. And at that moment, it was still safe and you could work it out and you could even continue to have a disagreement. So I think for me, it was learning that language because I didn't know that the first 5 years I was with Laird and I walked on eggshells and then I resented him and then we almost actually got divorced. And so I realized like, hey, you do whatever you got to do, but I need to have a space in there that like, it's cool for me.
That is such good advice. Your big wave is business deals.
Well, I think everybody's
the ones that I'm talking about don't come often, but when they come, like it's a very, very, I feel like, that game Operation?
Of course. Oh,
like with the tweezers and I'm like dissecting the kidney and if I don't pull it out just right, it's going to.
Well, I imagine everybody kind of has their version of that. I mean, I know.
Hope.
Yeah.
You
right.
hope.
You hope. Yes. I know that I can get extremely focused on whatever I'm focused on. And that could like start to consume my days if I don't allow the space.
This is what I've realized too, is once you understand the formula of the process, it gets easier. So like I'll see, like I can spot like when it's just like a big wave when the wave's going up. Yeah. And then the tip of the wave, I know when it's going to tip and then I know when it's going to go down. Like I can almost like a science project spot it.
Yeah, I think that's one thing cool about being with somebody. But you're you're managing. Now you have one daughter. Now you're going to have 2 children, and then your business is growing. You're going through your own personal changes in life. I think it's, stepping back once in a while, and also remembering that intensity about Michael that he also directs at you. I mean, clearly, you bit into, you were like, oh, that's my girl, and then here we are. So I think it's also remembering. I always say threading the line back to all the things that you love about that, and just appreciating it, and then having compassion for them, because they're suffering, and hopefully they do that conversely for us in our own different way, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I'm suffering.
What's one thing,
Well,
you guys have been married for a long time, what's one piece of advice that you've taught Laird, and one thing that he's taught you that you guys always go back to?
I think Laird is just a lot braver emotionally. Like, hey, if we're going to do this, let's be vulnerable. I was not so good at that. And so Laird is the one who's like, let's put our necks on the chopping block, and it's a risk to love someone. It's a risk. Like, you don't know if you're going to be together forever. What the hell does that mean? Someone might meet somebody, someone might die. It's like, it just is. And so why are we going to do this if we're just not going to be all in all the time? And I think I maybe suggested the idea of, if we are going to do this, why would we not come with this attitude of, how can I be helpful or of service or elevate you? I'm not going to ask you to do, like, it's also, everyone's responsible for their side of the street. How Laird wants to love me and support me, that's, Laird can do that, and how I want to do that. So I think those 2 things were something that we both maybe have helped each other with. Something I think he'd like to help me with more is like, he's like, what do you do for fun? And I'm like, oh my God, what do you mean fun?
That's
shit to
that's
do.
packed with a lot of things.
I'm like, fun? And he's like, yeah, is this what we're doing? Are we doing checklists and getting stuff done, and then like having meetings and doing this? He's like, what are we doing for fun? And so I think that's something I've been trying to pay attention to, but it's also, I don't need that much. Sometimes having a good meal and looking out at a view and being with my family or friends, I'm okay.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because it seems like you're more like Michael, where you're very organized. Everything is like,
you don't need that. It's
I'm
like
more
me.
like Laird.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's take a break and have some.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, like put the phone away. What I realize is I compartmentalize, and Michael is still.
No, I think you said it
Mm.
in a better way, which is like, sometimes people that need more of that, like, call it fun, they need, like, I don't need as much, honestly. Right.
Yeah. But that's also a control issue that I can say that.
I'm sure.
Right. Like, I'm hiding in my schedule or the things to do. And sometimes it's like when people talk about stillness being the hardest thing, sometimes just going and having fun for someone maybe like you and I might be harder than like, I have 20 things to accomplish today. And so that's also an opportunity to just look at it and be like, when is it productive, and when is it like, you know what, I need to go get a little uncomfortable.
Laird, if you're listening, I have a word for this. It's called MUS, made up stress. So when Michael comes to me with his to-do list of today's was, there's a shortage of formula. We need to get formula right now. Right this second.
That was yesterday.
Okay.
Today I'm in a good space.
I said the MUS isn't going to work for me today. I've got a lot going on. Go call a friend.
I think I was still talking. We're staying in a hotel, and I turned around and she was gone. She wasn't even in the room anymore. I was just talking to myself.
That's really smart.
And then okay.
I just say, I can't entertain this right now. I'm going to go over here. You can go over here and stew.
Moving out to Austin's been really helpful for me, because I think being in big cities all the time is not good for the human soul.
No.
And I know not everybody can escape a city, like you're in here and working, but I think we got to a place, I'm like, okay, you would think that we would stay in a place like this, or, in this office and this company. And I was just sitting, I was like, okay, I can't imagine being stuck here like this all the time, especially with young kids. And not to say that I don't like LA, there's great parts of it, but getting away from a big city and having more space and being able to reflect more and get with your own thoughts a little bit more is, I think, extremely helpful.
I mean, I understand the concept of cities, but technically it's like we are supposed to be in much smaller groups, and just the energy of being around a bunch of people is hard on us, especially if we're paying attention. You know, it's like if you're looking around and you're feeling things, and so and just using nature as a grounding tool, I think is super important. I mean, even though I live here, I live in a very natural open space because my husband would be a lunatic. We go to New York for business and he's like, why do people do this to themselves? You know, he doesn't, 2 days and I'm like, oh, we got to get out of here. We got to get Laird out of here.
It reminds me of when Crocodile Dundee went over there.
Totally.
Remember that movie?
Except sort of a more like aggravated crocodile, not like such a good natured one.
He was like chill about it.
Yeah. You said on Almost 30's podcast, I think it was, you were talking about your relationships with women and your friends. And you were talking about how, and I'm probably going to flub what you said, but you basically said that you try to do things that are productive, like invite them into the sauna or do like an ice bath. And when you also said something about how you would teach a class and a lot of women would want to come and go to lunch or get their nails done with you, and it's just not your vibe. And I felt that from the depths of my soul. For so long, I felt like there was something wrong with me because I'm just not the kind of girl that wants to do a sleepover. It's just not. And by the way, if you are, great. But my personality, it's just, that's not it. And that really resonated with me. How do you manage that when people want to hang out with you and do things that you don't want to do?
Well, first of all, this goes back to like our natures. You seem like a lot more fun. And I could see where girls are like, I want to have a girls' night with you. They don't look at me and be like, yo, Gabby looks prime for a girls' night. It's like, I mean, you know, I even think from women's athletics, you just have a different way that you learn how you're allowed to talk to your friends. And women, you know, playing sports with women where it's like, I don't like that. I want this. What are you doing? And then as you add a kid or two, and then all of a sudden you have less time. And so I think it's feeling comfortable with loving people your way. Now, so having said that, let's say I have somebody that's important to me and they have a certain love language. Okay, granted, I'll go out of my way to try to hit that language. But for the most part, it's like, hey, I'm going to love you in the language that I speak, which is going to be like, we're going to train together. If you're really in a pinch, I'll be there. I don't want to wear florally dresses and have a beautifully orchestrated meal. Like the napkins are so cute. I don't care. I heard Jim Quick. I don't know if you guys have ever talked to him.
The mind.
Yeah, the memory and reading.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so he said something that I thought was really genius. He said, everybody's walking around with a question. They all have a question, right? Like he said, I could say to you, a woman says, I hope people like me. He goes, you don't even have to meet her and you know something about her if that's the question. Like Michael might be like, okay, are we fortified or whatever? He said, do you know what your question is? And I go, 100%. I know what my question is. My question is, there's two and they're back to back. The first one is, what's the point? And the second is, what's the right way to act? Right? In that, because it's like if we're doing stuff, but see, within that, I have lessons because sometimes the point is just to be. But even within that, to me, that's a real point. To be is fine. But when you're in a thing and all girls are like, oh, and those shoes and oh, I'm like, oh, what's the point? And indirectly, sometimes I find those environments to be competitive indirectly. Like they're really getting dressed up and showing how each one has accessorized their outfit. And it feels at times like it could be they're actually competing with each other. And with my friends, I want them to know they're totally safe and I'm not here to compete with them. And I think it helps having been 6'3" and 170. I didn't play that game. I was like, I went to the store, it never fit, so let's not worry about it. I mean, that's part of it too.
I felt like when I had my first baby that everyone was like, oh, let's do a mom group. And like visceral reaction. And by the way, if you like that, like that's fine. But
yes.
For me, that's exactly how I felt was like, what's the point? And maybe it's community and I'm missing that. And maybe I have community with the Skinny Confidential. So it's already been, I don't know. But
and in your partnership. And aren't you close to like your mom and your grandma and all that?
I'm very close to my family.
Right. So I think sometimes everyone is different and you have a busy working life.
Yeah.
The other thing is I think it's hard in certain situations where if like that, this has sort of become your full-time job and it's scary and you're isolated, you'd want to hook into a group. And so I think there's a lot of languages with that, but it's also become highly commercialized, like more so in your time, less so in mine. And it didn't exist like when my parents had kids. So it's become also like a thing because everyone also has to show like, I'm a good mom and look at how organized I am and look at my cute stroller and all this stuff. We didn't have that. It was like, are they breathing? They're alive? Oh my God, good job,
That sounds kind of nice. It takes a lot of the pressure off.
I think my question is, why are we doing this with everything?
Well, Michael's the worst because
Right?
if
That's my question.
Michael's
Yeah.
thing, and this is also my thing too, if we're at dinner with someone and they're planning the next dinner while we're at dinner, we're out. Like,
Yeah.
we're out. Like when we're at dinner with you and we're present at dinner and we're planning the next dinner, it feels like opportunistic-y vibes.
Yeah. Transactional.
Yeah, transactional. It's a better word.
Yeah.
And to me, it feels like it's like just like checking, like, oh, let's get another date on the calendar. Like it doesn't feel the lack of purpose and depth feels off.
Yeah.
But I think what's the point? And listen, I'm sure there's a lot for me to learn in that question too that you said.
Well, it'd be interesting if you start to just, when you're moving in and out of scenarios, to go, what keeps showing up for me? And the other interesting thing to pay attention to is if you have like, you keep running into situations or people or resistance, those are times where you can go, oh, you know what? Maybe I need to stop and take a look at what's going on with me, that I'm creating all this, resistance around me or friction or just whatever. And so I always love the saying, Byron Katie's like, if you want to change your environment, change yourself. And so it's just reminding people too that, unfair things happen, but oftentimes it's not happening to you. It's what you're also creating.
100%. Michael says that a lot to me. What boundaries do you set around your life? So for instance, it's so easy to get access to anyone now. We have DM, we have email, we have text message. Text message for me has been a hard one. I haven't wrapped my head around that one. How do you
haven't wrapped your head around text message?
Meaning like I haven't wrapped my head around how to deal with it. If someone texts you, I don't think I think that you're coming into someone else's space asking for their time.
Well, it depends. I think it really depends the context.
Not talking about work, by the way, because if any of my employees I'm not talking about work. I'm talking about like if a friend comes into your text message, they want a direct response. How do you have a boundary around that because you're so busy?
I think it's again, I haven't set it up that everyone thinks I'm going to respond right away. So I think it's also setting a tone that people will know when you get to it or when you're on your phone, because there's times, hours in the day, I may not be on my phone. And certainly if there's a crisis, either personally, like one of my teenagers is going through something, I might be a little closer to my phone, and in work, if we're dealing with something that's time sensitive. But I think it's not placing the same importance on every single thing in life and the communication. And you can, like, you get trained, you can sort of train the people in your life, like, oh, this is how Michael responds. And it isn't, the rolling dots the second that you fly out your text. So it's interesting. I think we always find the people who understand our language. Those ends up being the people, I always say the people who could come to my house unannounced, never do. The people I wouldn't actually mind showing up unannounced, they never would. And so you'll find that those people are like they're telling you their language and like, sort of being self-governed. But I think you can set clear boundaries like, hey, listen, and never apologize. That'd be the worst, right? You don't get back to someone for 3-4 hours. Don't start with, hey, sorry, it took me so long to get back. Because what you're saying is I'm engaging in this understanding versus, hey, what's up? Hey, I got your text. Or whatever the response is. So just don't apologize. It's like starting emails with an apology.
That's a big mistake people are making in everything now. They're apologizing for things they're not actually sorry for, or engaging in games that they shouldn't be engaging in, right? You see that on a wide scale, right? Like people just jumping into things and apologizing for things they don't actually care about, that they're not actually even sorry about.
Well, I think people are looking for purpose.
Yeah.
And also, it's a scary time. I'm glad I give people a lot of credit right now who, let's say they are 16 to 35. I think it's a very difficult time. No one has nuanced conversations, and life is all nuance. So few things are definitively, black and white. So much of it is gray. And I think people are apologizing because it's like nobody wants to get thrown under the bus or have any dye cast in the water on them.
It's interesting you say that because we're probably in that demo, but we've been doing this. I mean, Lauren's been creating content for 12, 13 years now, but we've been doing this now for 6 years. So I think like we've gone through so many of the cycles of that.
Have you ever gotten smashed? Have people ever come at you?
Yeah, I mean, well, it happens all the time, but I think what it is that we're mature enough and old enough and experienced enough in this space, at least, to understand what that is, right? Like if there's something that we do that is harmful or where our intention's in the wrong place, which is typically not, or where we misstep in a serious way, then we'll acknowledge that. But I'm not going to jump on the apology train because the flavor of the week has changed and somebody doesn't like hearing something that's said on the internet.
Yeah. And I think it's dangerous. I think the worst thing someone could do, especially if they really haven't done anything wrong, is backpedal.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Especially like doing this network, I see a lot of people jumping into things where they haven't actually done anything wrong, but maybe the landscape has changed. Yeah. And then they're on this apology tour. I'm like, what are you saying sorry for? You're not actually sorry. And you're making it worse because now everyone's piling on. It's like in old high school fights or whatever, like somebody on the ground, all the kids go around and start kicking. That's exactly what it's like online.
Yeah, I know. It's very. I'm curious because you guys are really pretty in tune with these things, and now you're going to have 2 young children. I'm interested on. Do you think we're in a transition and it's just really weird and uncomfortable with technology, and we're sort of going to come out of this differently, or do you think it's going to get worse before it gets better? Like, where do you think? Like when people start saying things like, I'm triggered for everything. Words, people are giving whatever intellectual concepts that trigger young people, whatever. How do you view this?
If I'm triggered, I examine myself. I am not going to go around telling people that they have to adjust their behavior in life because of my feelings. And listen, again, everyone's different. People may not agree with me, but if I'm triggered, there's something that's a me problem. And I think that people need, in my opinion, to start really taking accountability for their own side of the street. If we start there, I feel like it'll get better. I do think people are getting sick and tired of every little tiny thing being so fragile and delicate.
Yeah. Here's the way I think about it.
Uh-oh.
Well, no, here's the way I think, honestly.
You have an hour? We know how you think about it.
I think that listen, we talk to a lot of people on the show and we've, have a wide audience at this point.
Yeah.
And the majority of that audience and the majority of people that we have on the show are pretty middle of the road, level-headed thinkers, right? Mm-hmm. They're also not the type of people that are going to get online and start screaming about things as it upsets them, right? They're going to be like, okay, maybe I don't like that, but they're going to just go about their day and get back to life. Because that's what normal, rational people do, right? People that are regulated, I would say. There's corners of the internet and I think online, which makes it hard especially for young people or people that are partaking on these platforms to recognize that you're maybe speaking, that's a minority of humankind, right? Like most people aren't these unhinged people that are constantly triggered and upset about everything, right? It's just those people are very vocal and loud about it.
Yeah.
So what I think we try to do on this show is point out that most people kind of fall in the middle and that it's okay to voice up and say, hey, this is absurd behavior. Like grow up, put some pants on, stop being so upset about everything.
Yeah.
And then the other side, like, if there is some dark corners of the internet and people are doing some harmful things, like, okay, hold those people accountable, but do it from a place of love and respect and then move on with their life.
Yeah.
I think like that's what I would try to teach my children is like, hey, this is how most people are. There's going to be some extremes, but like don't get caught up in the extremes.
How do you do it when your daughter comes to you or one of your daughters comes to you and says, I'm triggered? Or do they not?
Well, it's only going to be my youngest because my other 2 don't. That's not their generation or their vernacular. And depending on if I see it as a manipulation, I'm like, oh yeah, no, not in this house. Like you're not doing that. Because my feeling is life actually can be hard. You started a business, you're in a marriage, you're raising a child. life is going to have challenges. Go into nature. Nature will kick your ass. So if we all think it's like, oh, it's going to be all okay, and how do you feel? I actually feel like I'm doing her a disservice. So if I know she's just manipulating me, I'm like, cut the crap. But conversely, what I have learned, though, as a parent, is to deeply listen. That has been something that I could say with each girl, each daughter, I've gotten better at. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. But I don't let it, some of that stuff in our house, I won't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can negate people's feelings, but I think providing a wider context and saying, yes, there is this, but there's also all of this over here. And it's maybe, and like you said, life is very difficult, and I want to arm my children to be able to deal with life and not, if something is said somewhere, they need to have armor to be able to deal with that, because the other stuff life's going to throw at you is way worse.
Way worse.
Right.
And I think it's our job to, like you said, how do you get the tools to also know when it's time to come in and say, hey, this person's saying this, they're upset, and I participated in that. That is, I need to apologize or take responsibility. And also sort of conversely go, oh, I'm not engaging. This is their drama. And how do I protect myself and navigate these kinds of situations? Because they also use it now. They weaponized it 100%. And so for me, it's like, I certainly don't let my daughter bring that home. I mean, because they're already doing it sort of with each other, with their languages. They know certain words that all of a sudden it's like everything's off limits. It's fascinating.
What's something that you look back on that you wish you knew about parenting 10 or 15 years ago?
It's a great question. I wish I had known, we didn't know so much about the technology. And so we were ill prepared. And before we knew it, here it was. And we didn't get a chance to sort of figure out how to really put a system in place to at least have a fighting chance to navigate it. That and, when they hand you a baby, it's like a very hopeful moment. It's so hopeful. It's a blank slate. And then you think, they're going to do this. I joke, it's like you're going to be a rocket scientist and a professional athlete, and you're going to, save the planet, and you're going to do all these things. And instead of really trying to focus on who are you and what's going to be good for you. And recently, actually, I was talking to my friend. Have you ever gotten a facial by John too?
No. Is it good?
Yeah, it's tough though. It's like it's almost like a fascial relief. It's very
I love
painful.
That. That sounds like my kind of facial.
Yeah, when you're done after babies and nursing, we'll talk about it.
Okay. But
he did give me some advice that I think is really powerful for all of us. He's like, do you pray for your children? And I'm like, I do. And I'm at a place where all of this, it's like, is it a guy with a white beard? I don't know. There's something intelligent happening in the universe? I would think if it rains and things grow and we eat those things, and I don't know, your human body, you have a baby growing in your stomach. That seems like a miracle to me. Something is happening. And having said that, do I understand, whatever the matrix? I don't. However, he said, well, pray as if it's already happened. So instead of me praying like, okay, Brody's my youngest daughter. Okay, I hope Brody becomes empathetic and all these things. I'm like, thank you for making Brody empathetic and for giving her deep and loving relationships.
You put the frequency out there.
Yep. And I do that in a vibration because I feel like your kids, I said this with coaches. I've had coaches where they looked at me and they go, you got this. And you're like, oh, I got this. They've already said to you, you've got this. And I felt with my kids when they go through bumpy times, what I would vibrate to them is like, you're going to figure it out. So that they're not like, oh, my parents think I'm, off the rails. But now one step even further, like, thank you for her great health, whatever it is that feels important to you at that time, and pray as if it's been done.
Do you feel by doing that, you also start treating her in that way?
Yes.
And then it also makes it more real for her,
yeah,
right?
It does. It's such a very good point. And you can do that in your business and in your relationships, but absolutely, because all of a sudden, again, you want to change your environment, change yourself. All of a sudden you're talking to them and looking at them differently. And something about that, it's like when you don't fight it, when when you have a teenager, instead of leaning into every issue, right? Like, let's say I found a vape pen from time to time and I'm like, hey, listen, I'm bringing this up. I'm actually not going to make a big deal of it because in the grand scheme of things, it's not.
Yeah.
It goes away. It just, it moves, they move through it quicker.
It makes a ton of, like I always say to Lauren, she would get a lot farther with me by acknowledging what I do, not what I don't do, because I'll probably pick up the slack and
Is
do
this
the
a
other thing.
manipulation?
No, but it's true because
that
I think
I need
like,
to acknowledge.
like
this
imagine
more?
if you went and if you were talking to your wife or something, you're like, you know, I wish you would do this. I wish you were better at this. And as opposed to saying like, hey, you're such an amazing partner. You do this and all these things, because I feel like the other things then take care of themselves because the person is.
I agree with that.
Right.
I agree. I mean, I think it doesn't really work anyway. So the other way would be, you know, it's like even with Laird, you know, I always say I really appreciate, because, you know, we have other companies and other work, and I'm like, I really appreciate you working so hard on behalf of the family, and I appreciate, you know, whatever. He's a great dad. And I do believe that when we can sort of look at that person and say, because we already know what's weird about us and what we got to work on.
Yeah.
We do. I mean, Michael's a conscious person. So I think there's something to be said for, I really appreciate how hard you work, and or whatever it is, or how loving you are, or dedicated. Even like, you know, I think you look great. You know, I think that
I did tell you that the other day.
It's so important.
Your muscles look big.
Thank you.
Oh, way to go. That's a good one. Guys love that
Nothing
one.
like you getting the hottest you ever looked when I'm just gaining the pounds.
But temporary.
You're right. It's like finding the vape pen. I'm just
You're making a baby.
We had Patrick Schwarzenegger on with his mother.
Oh, yes.
And we asked him this question, and I would ask your kids the same question. And I would love to know your thoughts on this.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think it is for your kids to have such successful parents? And it's not like, you know, it's a kind of successful.
Well, yeah, but we're not the Terminator.
I mean,
well, maybe like the real
I
life.
don't know. I would
because fame it brings another element.
Okay, but
Fame's
I'm
tough.
not even talking about just fame. I'm talking about success. The success that you both have had is like, how, if I'm your kid, I'm like, how do I even
It's
live
not
up
in
to
our
that?
house, though.
It's not in your house. That's what I want to know.
I will say this. I have a therapist that I worked with for my middle daughter, and she said, because we all thought, oh, we're gonna have a clean house and a peaceful marriage, and like we'll be kind to our kids and we'll have opportunity, and that will take care of it, because that's what we didn't have, right? Versus she says, well, can you acknowledge that your kids actually have to navigate something that you and Laird didn't? Because Laird and I had zero expectation put on us. We do, you know, you guys I know come from nice families.
Sure.
And I call that a good family, not McKennedy. It's like, okay, whatever. You know what I mean? And so we were freewheeling. And so when we landed on anything, people were like, wow, cool. Like I think my mother, when I was going to college on an athletic scholarship, barely knew for which sport. You know what I mean? Like there's no expectation. So as a parent learning, hey, you know what? Your kids do have it a lot easier than you do. However, there is, and then, oh, they're tall, and oh, they look athletic, or you can do sports. But they're all different. Like I have one that doesn't care, and I have one that it really it impacted her in a real way. So it's just trying to open that dialogue and see it that way. But, you know, I have a friend who said to me, isn't it interesting how parents have to so precisely wound their children in like such a specific way for their lives? And I just think there is something that we all sort of, if we can look at it that way, be like, wow, that is what helped me do X. And we all need it, whatever it is.
The reason I think Lauren asks also is we meet people all the time, especially in this city, and like not even just celebrity children, but just children of parents that are moguls, right?
Well, yeah.
Right. And then we went to dinner with somebody the other day, and their family is like, by all means, like upper echelons of success. And the kid is very, very successful by any standard, but he feels like a failure because like the bar is so high.
Yeah.
And it's weird to watch because by any measurement, if he was just on his own, isolated, he'd be like, wow, that's an extremely successful person. But it's like he can't wrap his head around that.
I had somebody say to me once I wish I remembered who it was. And maybe I heard it on a podcast actually, where they said, okay, I go to a village and I give you $100 million. You're pretty freaking happy. The problem is I give everyone else in the town $1 billion.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, what? Well, I only have 10% of what they have, you know? So it's like, that goes on. And so, it's like every life, every path, we think because we go, oh, that's our parents, it's a direct line. No, it's your own individual path. So it'd be interesting if he like maybe could have successful relationship and good health and like all this stuff, that also would play into this definition of success.
Have you ever talked to Robert Greene? I feel like you have. Have you haven't?
I haven't. I saw him on yours though.
Oh, I want to.
amazing.
At some point, you should. I think you would really get along with him. But in one of his chapters, I think in 48, one of the laws is never follow in a great man's shoes or a great woman's
That's
shoes.
actually the reason. That's the reason I asked the question.
But the idea is like if your father or mother was, in your case, let's say Uber athlete, super successful entrepreneur, like maybe you want to do a different thing. Like maybe you want to go into a different line of work because you're stuck.
Like one of your
comparing all
like
the time.
It's like if Brody was like, I'm going to be a big wave surfer.
Yeah.
That's hard.
I've tried to get Brody to play volleyball. She's perfect for it. Won't. I just said, I won't even come to the practice. I'll drop you off because she's perfect for it. But I think, what's so funny as parents, so this kid in particular gets straight A's in school, right? And this is like what a knucklehead I am. I'm like, yeah, that's good. Okay. And there's a part of my mentality that's like, if she got all C's, but somehow was a superstar athlete, because that's what saved me. I'm putting my language and my template on her. And I finally had the thought like, hey, ding dong, she takes care of herself. She's, organized. She has straight A's. She has friends. I haven't caught her in some radical situations. She's all right,
What do you do with how busy you are? You have so much going on with business. You're posting your podcast, all these different things. Sometimes I feel guilty as a mom that I'm doing all of these different things. Sometimes in front of my daughter.
Yeah,
she's 2.
Yeah.
And she sees me like doing this, but there's a feeling of guilt, especially as a mom. I notice it's not as bad for the man, of course.
Yeah, I think guilt is already a part of parenting. Like, am I giving him too much? Am I not giving him enough? Am I loving enough? Am I too loving? Do I spoil him? It's all that. But I used to say to my girls, because I've always worked from home, and that was a conscious decision, is like, I could be in an office and I would have to leave an hour before to drive. So sometimes I'm going to be in my office and you're going to come in and I want to be here for you. But if it feels like I'm tucked away, it's like I'm at work. So it's sometimes getting them to understand, like, oh, Brody liked to ride horses. I go, yeah, okay. Well, you know how that happens? Like work. But you're always going to feel guilty. That's what I swear to God, mom and guilt, like, I don't know. They feel like they should go together. And I don't know if it's because that is the job. The job is showing up, that knowing you'll never get it right. The job is showing up that you feel bad about it, because that's where our growth comes in. And it's so uncomfortable. And I don't know if it's ever ending.
I somehow knew you were going to say that. It's part of the job.
That was a long sigh.
Yeah, it's a long sigh. I would love to know what the tools in your toolbox are that you use every single day. Is it, chlorophyll? Is it, I know it's turmeric. Is like, what are the tools that when you're prepping yourself for a busy day that you're reaching for?
Well, first, everything is in sleep. So it starts first, if you guys can get to bed, get to bed. If you can turn off, and I'm guilty of this because the only time I can really unwind or watch mindless entertainment is at night. But sleep is really important. And then when I get up, what I'll do is I'll drink greens first because we're dehydrated. We haven't had anything for 8 hours or whatever. So I'll do greens first. Then I do have a coffee. And then as far as like staple vitamins, I would say quercetin is a staple for me. Magnesium is a staple. Vitamin D, zinc, and then I will come in and out with like fancy things like M&M, and different things that I think could boost either longevity or aging slowly and things like that. So there's sort of like these fringe things that I'll experiment with, like if you talk to Huberman, things like that, or David Sinclair.
I haven't talked to Sinclair Huberman. Do you guys do NAD?
The IVs? Yeah, but I also will take like True Niagen on a regular basis. There's a couple things, and I can send it to you guys out there that are pretty interesting. But it's an interesting thing where you go, okay, how much of this, because it can get overwhelming. Yeah. Like, well, do I take it now? Do I take it later? Empty stomach, night or morning? But definitely quercetin and D, I think omegas for all of us, especially like right after you give birth, will be really important. Because a lot of women, they'll say, oh, my skin, my hair, and they're just deficient because you're giving out the output so much, especially, with nursing and things like that.
That's so funny you say that. I got the worst postpartum depression and anxiety, and I wasn't taking omegas. And I look back on that, and I think that is such a big reason.
Well, then she did a blood test recently and said like, hey, you're really low on omega. So now she's supplementing.
Yeah. Omegas.
It's really important.
Okay.
And I just say to people, like, you have to, it's this double-edged sword of like, you're constantly looking at yourself, constantly being accountable, and then simultaneously, especially if you're a new mom or what have you, or starting a business and getting your ass, or just is having a bit of grace with yourself. And don't make it too complicated. It's like, yes, I train all the time. Do I make it too complicated? No, I don't. But consistency is key. Do I feel really uncomfortable a couple times a week? Sure, I do. But it doesn't mean you have to suffer through it. And then the food, it's like, that we all sort of know. I did learn recently, or was reminded, there's a woman who wrote a book. If I would suggest it for people, I think you can read it and it makes perfect sense. The Glucose Revolution. And what it is it's on your plate. It's your fiber first, your greens, then your animal protein and fat second, and then your carbohydrate or sugar last. And the way that this impacts your glucose levels and your insulin it's pretty dramatic, and it is scientific. So that's one easy way to manage those big spikes, which lead to overeating and being tired in the middle of the day and such.
So you don't want to, so the reverse, if you start with the carbs,
it's not good, because that gets into your bloodstream first, that glucose, and then you're into the up and down spike, where if you can get the fiber, it almost creates like a netting. So everything gets in slower, and then you put animal protein and fat. And then if you're going to have a carbohydrate, and obviously if we sit and go to a restaurant, what's the first thing they do? They put down the bread basket, which, never mind gluten. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about insulin and glucose.
Just the way we're consuming first. That's what we start with.
Yep.
It's the wrong way.
So
Correct.
what is on your plate in the morning? What's a perfect breakfast for you?
I'm not a big breakfast person. If I was going to eat breakfast, I would say if you eat animal protein, have an egg and avocado. Most people don't want to eat a bunch of vegetables in the morning. It's not great. So that is a way. I personally I drink a coffee loaded with fats, and so I have the energy from the coffee and the fat for my brain, and that gets me through to lunch. And if I'm not crazy, like super physical or tired or on a certain part of my cycle, I'll roll through to dinner. So I'll get that bigger window during the day.
Oh, wow.
So you're obviously using Laird's turmeric creamer, right?
Correct. I actually like the cacao. Laird does the turmeric every day. But I will also even add coconut oil, and then emulsify that in with the creamer and the espresso shots.
So you do espresso, a scoop of the cacao,
maybe two,
mm-hmm. and then the coconut oil.
Yeah.
And your coffee, and that can sometimes hold you over until dinner. So
easily.
Is that intermittent fasting?
It's a version of just giving your digestion a break. But what happens is, see this, ghrelin and leptin, these are hormones that we produce that either make us feel satiated or hungry.
Right.
The problem is if we get these big glucose spikes, then all of a sudden we're tired, and then we have a tendency to eat more. So if I start my morning with fat and I'm sort of in that cycle, it's just an easier glide. Where if I eat a muffin, I'm hungry at 11, and then I'm tired and all the stuff starts happening. So if I could just encourage people to play a little game with themselves and experiment, because that's the other side of it. The way you process food is different. So let's say Michael and I ate the same food, fried food, which, by the way, doesn't increase your glucose. Doesn't mean it's good for you. But if Michael's healthier than I am and we eat it, his glucose levels, he might actually be more negatively impacted by the food because he's healthier.
Because my body can't process the
Correct. So it's just really important for people to remember we're all the same and we're all different.
Okay.
But is that why when you get super healthy and say then you eat fast food, you feel like it destroys?
You're sensitive. Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing. Don't get so precious that you can't, eat something and be like, yeah, I'm good.
When you put coconut oil for fat in your coffee, is it just 1 teaspoon or is it like a big heaping scoop?
It's a pretty good amount. And if I can find it, actually, certain people would maybe like ghee. I use a whole raw unpasteurized butter. I'll use a little bit of that as well.
And when you break, I don't want to call it a fast.
Yeah.
It's just not
when
fast.
I go to eat.
When you go to eat,
Mm-hmm.
what's on your plate?
Plants and animals.
Plants and animals.
Yeah, pretty much.
No carbs.
I mean, I mean, I have a sweet potato.
It's a plant, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but it's like real food. You know, that's the thing is, I think people have to look at their stress. If you say to me, okay, Gabby, what are the pillars? It's chronic inflammation. It's 20% genetics. It's 80% lifestyle. Doesn't matter what your mom or dad looks like, period. Your eyes are blue. Yeah, maybe because of that. However, it's 80% lifestyle. People take this death sentence like, well, my parents have fought their way. It's like, no, you inherited their lifestyle.
Kind of a narrative though, a little bit.
But I can understand it because it's confusing. The world, we've made it so confusing because we have so much information. So chronic inflammation, how do we get out of that? Okay. Gut health. Everyone goes gut. It's very true. Got to get your microbiome dialed because that's how you absorb things. That's how you react to things, your sleep, so many things. Now, if you take a bunch of aspirin every day or Advil, all these things, guess what? You are destroying your microbiome. So people have to...
I don't take aspirin that much anymore.
No, it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
It's like, and why? Why are you taking aspirin? For what?
We had, I don't know if you've ever met Dr. Daryl Joffrey. He's a gut specialist. He came on. He did all like my microbiome tests and checked all the stool and everything. And so like that's, because I did my blood test.
Thank you for letting us know.
Well, I got to tell Gabby this.
No, yeah.
I did all my blood tests and they came back great because I've been taking care of myself. But then he's like, let's check your gut just to be sure. And there's issues there that I would have never found if I just did a blood test. So now I'm like very focused on healing the gut.
Yeah,
I feel
so
better. Yeah.
I would encourage people like, so whatever's in your lifestyle, and that means like we can't control every relationship, but there's something to be said for every chance you have the opportunity to not engage in things that always upset you. Like, is it a friendship? Even if it's a family member, you have the right to say, this isn't working for me. So either make it work or say, I can't see you. I'm here if you need me, but I can't do this, right? So chronic inflammation, your gut, stress, and then moving and eating and sleep. I mean, it's not that hard. And if people are out there, you know, banging a bunch of alcohol a couple times a week, you're going to pay. I mean, it's just the way it is. And it's completely like, everyone's like, what's the big deal? And I'm like, yes, but it's all the time.
It's compounding.
Correct.
How do you move? What are your pillars with movement? Is strength training? Is it pool? What's your go-tos?
It's HIIT. It's being on land. Women need to not worry and avoid lifting weights. We need that. That muscle tissue will burn more calories for you in the long run than like going nuts on a Stairmaster. So I'd like to encourage women to time under tension, lift some weights.
It's why the weight gain has been so different. I implemented weights. It's
Really?
with this pregnancy. It's completely different weight gain because of the weights.
The mood's a little more balanced. Honestly.
And you know what's funny is it's harder actually because you have a small child running around. Yeah. Because the first time it's like, oh, I'm tired, I'm going to lay down.
Yeah. No, you're not going to lay down.
No, you don't do that.
You're not going to do anything. You're not going to ever have silence in your life again.
No, never.
I try to go to the bathroom and lock the door, and she's still.
Oh no, there's nothing worse. And then how about this? They come in there and you're going to the bathroom. Let's say you're a human, and you're actually using the bathroom, and then they're like 2 or 3, and they're like, it smells. You're like, yeah, no shit. Thanks a lot. Like, get out. So it's
you don't need to be critiqued with judge and jury.
Seriously. But I will say this to you guys: if you're laying in your bed, and you know when a kid comes running, you know that patter, listen to that patter, because as they get older, they don't do that quite that much, and it's
heartbreaking.
He's gonna cry.
No, but it's magical.
He's crying.
And
I'm gonna cry now.
It's just to be cherished. It isn't when the time goes on to something else, there'll be something else to cherish. But that little running, those little footsteps, people go, oh, what sound? I'm like, that is one of the sounds of life. And it doesn't mean everyone should have kids. I'm saying if you have a kid because you're sleep deprived and all these other things, listen to that little patter going across.
Someone told me when you're mad at your toddler because they're throwing a tantrum, look at their little hands.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I've been doing. I've been looking at her little hands. She threw a tantrum the other day. I just looked at her hands.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy. How about, or you just go, can you do that louder? Oh. That's awesome. Can you get louder? That's amazing. Do you think you could cry louder?
And they try.
And I have another friend who just does the same thing as they do. And then the kid's like, what's going on?
Try that.
I discovered a new thing.
Yeah, this is a good tip.
Well, she was throwing a huge tantrum, and then I just was like, engaging person. Then I went over to her coloring book and just started coloring on my own, but like didn't invite her. To
Yeah,
color,
yeah.
Just started like drawing.
That nipped it right in the
and
bud.
then she came over.
That's how you know she's my daughter.
Then she started coloring with me.
He ignored her and he let her come to him the way, your dad says how to get a girl, treat her like train a cat.
Well, I didn't cold shoulder her.
You know, like you want attention. The cat.
I just said, okay, I get it. You do this. I'm going to go over here and do this.
And then she was kind of leaned in.
Then she's like, oh, I got to do that too.
Okay, so you do strength training. You have to go back to what you do. How many days a week?
I try about 3 days a week to lift weights out of the water, but I am using weights in the water. I actually have a torn labrum right now, so I've been working around it in my hip. And then I sauna maybe 3-4 days a week. And, I don't have that much time to train. And then I control a lot of it through my perspective, my attitude, what time I go to bed, and what I shove in my mouth.
So you don't work out every single day?
No, and rest is very important. So I'd say if you went really hard for 5 days and then like I'll do, have you guys seen Knees Over Toes? Have you seen Ben?
Yep. I've been watching a lot of his stuff a lot more lately.
Right. So I've been walking more backwards. So I'll go, let's say on a Sunday morning, I might go walk a couple miles backwards. But now Laird, of course, being Laird, now we're carrying kettlebells. He's walking on his hands.
Yeah.
No, we're carrying kettlebells.
I wouldn't be surprised if you said Laird's doing handstands backwards.
No, it's really good though. I'd be interested to know how that would make your hips feel if you walk and your pelvis right now, just a little, not far, just a little bit, and see
to walk backwards.
Yeah, I think it'd be
interesting. I'm going to show you the videos on it. It's like these little tiny movements.
I think I actually might have seen it on your social media, something.
Yeah, it's great.
Maybe like a podcast clip or something.
Yeah, he's really good. So, and I think he's really onto something. And so just incorporate that and go into a big open space. I go to Zuma Beach, which is big and open, and so you can walk backwards. I have a really quick question to ask you guys because I know we're probably on time, but what has surprised you individually and then maybe as a team just about becoming parents?
Something that's maybe a con is I can't believe how guilty you feel. I can't believe how guilty you feel. I feel
you're a good mom then. Good
no,
job.
I just feel like I have I put such an emphasis on my time, and then it's like you also have to put such an emphasis on if you're doing it right or wrong, and there's no like right answer or wrong.
Everybody says this, and it's cliche to say, but I think everybody's like, oh, you don't really start to live until you have children, and I honestly like believe a lot. Like I don't think it's like you don't live, but it's such an immediate perspective shift of what's actually important in life, and all the things that you think are important before you have children kind of go by the wayside. Like all the things that I put either value on, or I'm like, oh, this is the most important thing, or I got to really pay attention to this. A lot of that now is like second, third, fourth. Mm-hmm. And even it's helped me in business because you'll get all these guys in here and they're rah-rahing and girls about whatever this deal or this opportunity, but it's always now measured against like, okay, like I care about my wife, my kids' health, like all of that. And if that went away, then like all the other stuff doesn't matter anyway.
Doesn't matter.
I also think it's really fucking cool to see a mixture, and maybe this is narcissistic, of to see like the traits mixed together.
Genetics is a far out thing.
It's wild.
But it's still wild. 20% people, 20%. Now, having said that, as a parent, I will say, I think you expose them and you model, be good models. But if we really think how much we're really impacting them, I think they have a path. And so there's conversely this other side, which is like genetics is powerful, but I think these humans come in with sort of a path and a road that as parents should give us comfort a little bit in knowing like that you just want them to get in touch with their purpose. That's what you want.
Yeah, it's interesting because you talk to children who their parents let them flourish or that tried to dull it.
Mm-hmm. No, it's like I think yes, but also we come in, I think we actually fuck up that process because we try to put our idea of what success or a good life is onto them, and it may not be their path. More and more people have been talking about that lately.
I think so. And because also even think about this. Let's say Andre Agassi, he goes to the US Open, he wins the US Open. If you read his book, miserable the whole time. Is that success? Book, by the way. Right. But as the parent, if you were the coach, you were successful. But as the parent, that's a fail.
Right. You should have him on your podcast. I would love to
What's
hear
he
you
up
guys
to
talk.
lately, I wonder?
Can you guys
the
talk?
guy's like the baddest ass wife on the planet.
Yeah, he's-
Steffi Graf. I
well,
mean,
he-
come on.
Can you interview him or both of them? That would be
I think
such
she's
an honor.
I interviewed her years ago. I used to write for a magazine, and the whole time she was just like, I could see like, it was like, this is a woman who is so magnificent to watch, does not want to be in the public eye.
I get it. Listen, when you're just working towards your passion and then you have to do all this, by the way, Laird, I feel like this is him. Like when he just wants to surf the big waves and
Yeah.
he doesn't want to go over spreadsheets.
No.
This is what I say to you. I don't want to be on conference calls all week. That's not what I was built for. So I squeeze them all in on
Well,
Wednesday
neither do
and want
I.
to kill myself all of Wednesday. But it's just not, some people just aren't made
Lauren does this thing where she goes, I don't want to do this. Michael loves doing this. No, I don't like doing it either. I just have to do it.
You just do it better.
Yeah.
I want to be like Steffi Graf. I just want to.
She's, yeah.
I want to be
I
like
wanna be like
Laird.
Steffi
Just
Graf,
I want to
too.
surf my big waves and like have fun and like just squeeze all my conference calls in.
Well,
on
listen,
Wednesday.
we should have done this sooner.
Well, I admire the two of you individually and the fact
Thank
that
you.
you get it done also together. You're a great example. And congratulations, smooth sailing.
I hope it's smooth sailing.
Oh, it's incredible.
I'm gonna put the frequency vibration. It's smooth sailing. It is smooth.
Yeah,
sailing.
thank you for that very smooth delivery.
Yeah, thank you for the smooth delivery.
Yeah, and for anyone listening, I just I just want to. My whole thing is I'm just a cheerleader for. We really need to take care of ourselves, and unfortunately, nobody can do it for us but us. And that and however it works, it's not one size fits all, but you have to get involved.
You're a beautiful example to men and women. Really, I think it's so attractive the way that you are, the boundaries that you have. You can come back anytime. I could have asked you 6 million other questions. I guess I'll just go listen to more of your podcasts. Where can everyone find you? Pimp yourself out, your Instagram.
Oh no, I mean just
all your
Gabby
things.
Reece.
And do you want to do a code?
The podcast.
What
Go
if
check out the
someone wants
podcast.
to buy the cacao and the
It's
turmeric?
Gabby GABBY 22 or 2022. They'll get a big savings at lairdsuperfood.com.
Okay, and if you were to start with one, would you recommend the cacao?
Original.
Original.
Or if you're busy and you're on the road, InstaFuel, because all you do is add hot water and it's the coffee and creamer together and it's organic and vegan and all that.
And I'm going to get my raw, unpasteurized butter after I'm pregnant
At Air One, you can get it.
at Air One and put my coconut oil and fast.
No, you'll
or
go.
not fast,
well,
but just
after you're done nursing.
after.
Just let it be. Let it be.
Surrender.
How old are you? Can I ask?
35.
Okay, so I'm 52. So you
do
like,
not look 52.
but I'm just trying to remind you, like, there'll be time. You're
I know.
doing this now.
I know. That's, you know what I told Michael though? When someone says, oh, you're almost there, or like you just have to get through nursing,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like you're on a treadmill and they're like, you have to be on the treadmill for a month. And then 2 minutes in, he's like, you're almost there. And I'm like, no, I still have,
Yeah.
that's how it feels.
Take it in.
Take it in.
And just always have
Surrender.
the confidence. You'll get back to whatever size you want to get back to. Don't worry about that.
I guarantee you, if you look back at our first podcast we did with you, we had the same conversation. So I need
Did
to
we?
learn. Yeah.
Michael
bet
seems
you.
a little more serious this round, though.
Oh.
No. I'm just scared of saying the wrong thing to her when she starts going into how she feels about the pregnancy thing. Because I'm like, okay, I gotta be. I don't want to say you're almost there, but I also want to be supportive.
Yeah, I think less is more. And I
Yeah.
think I told you this. Always treat your partner just like your girlfriend, because she's already somebody mom and then she's going to be a new mom. Just do the girlfriend thing, because I hate when, I'm sorry, that's a little strong, but if guys are like, does mommy want a snack? It's like, I'm not your mommy, I'm your babe. And just love me and say, hey, you want to take a shower? I'll hold the baby. So for guys out there, if you have a new,
I've
Right.
thought about that advice a lot. I treat you
Yeah.
like my
The
girlfriend.
number one
Yeah.
thing I can tell a man is what you just said. Treat your wife like your
I
girlfriend.
never call you
A
mommy.
girlfriend.
oh,
I never do that.
But you,
'Cause you know that weirds
women
me out,
always
too.
want to
Yeah.
feel desired.
that's
Nothing-
it.
It's the main thing.
No, yeah.
If you can unlock that, all
Yeah.
the guys out there, we always want to feel desired.
That's it.
When you get too comfortable and I'm feeling like an old couch that you've had since high
Yeah.
school, I'm going to fuck you up.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
Because nobody likes to be taken for granted. But conversely, women also need to be complimentary to their men and also be like, you know what, you're really smart. Thank you.
Taylor, turn this
You
part
have a
up.
big, big, big personality.
Yeah,
Thank you,
big,
Lord.
huge.
Huge personality.
Thank
I
you.
can barely contain in the room.
Thank
Gabby,
you, Gabby.
thank you for
Thanks, you
coming
guys.
on. You're
Congratulations
amazing.
again.
Go listen to her podcast, you guys.